Hey everybody, Mike at conventioNOT. I cannot wait to share this episode with you. We're going to introduce Steve Hetzel. He's a coach with the Orlando Magic. Being an assistant coach in the NBA is a pretty big deal. What we're going to get into is more his path, his process. And in Steve's story, I think what you're going to find is the strength was always just foundational. I think what matters the most and what you'll hear about Steve through his discussion is just the persistent work ethic. What Steve expands upon is making family work and working hard to make that happen. So please stay tuned, everybody. I really, really hope you love today's episode. Ryan handles all the tech. I try to behave. I assume everything is always being recorded. Once we can see each other.
I just assume that everything is being recorded at all times.
You dedicated a whole podcast to that.
Yeah, we did talk about those home assistant devices a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah. I threw my Alexa in the trash after that.
Yeah, it's probably a good plan. Speaking of cool devices, I just want to I want to give a shout out to the teal headphones that are still making it.
Still surviving? I mean, they don't look like they really are built for multiple use.
They don't feel like they are either.
They look like macaroons.
I see that Steve has the Beats by Dre, undoubtedly.
Tony. Actually, I'll tell a quick story about, because these headphones are my life, right? So I have so much time on an airplane and you need noise cancellation and you just want to like pretend like you don't want people to talk to you sometimes. So I had like a really nice pair of Bose headphones, wireless. You know, you can label your phone or even your headphones, you can name them. So I named them Heaven, like this is my sanctuary. And so I get home from flight one night and I just had taken them off and putting them into the bag or on top of my bag in the car. And then when I got home and pulled into the driveway, I just pulled my bag out. I forgot that I put my headphones there. And so the headphones dropped into the driveway. And the next morning I just backed right over them. And it was like, when I heard the crunch, like I was almost started crying. I was just like, you gotta be kidding me.
You just crunched Heaven.
Heaven is gone. No, scratch, like trash, like crumbled, broke, nada. Yeah.
Did you have any doubt? Like the second you heard the noise, did you, like in a half a second, did you process what it was or no?
Oh, I know exactly what it was. It was my life crumbling.
You did, right? Like without giving any thought to your headphones all morning, the first thing you knew right away, you're like, fuck, I left my headphones in my bag. They fell out. I just ran over them that quickly.
When you feel your life crumble underneath your car tire, you know what it is immediately. I had a similar story with AirPods. So I lost a pair of AirPods, which turned out to be under the seat of our car, but not before I had to order another set. I punished myself for 6 weeks without AirPods, and it was hard. It was like my lifestyle was modified.
6 weeks with no earphones of any type.
Well, I used the corded ones for a while.
Oh, but that was primitive to you.
It's hard, man.
Well, it is. Like, it's one of those things. You never go back. Like, how many times did your hand hit the cord?
I admit, embarrassingly, you know me, man, I'm a little behind the times on stuff. I still use the corded headphones usually, like the shitty ones. And my ears are all misshapen, so the earbuds have never worked that good. I should probably invest in some good headphones.
Actually, because I don't like walking the path of everybody. I looked online and I found a different pair. So, nobody knows that I'm wearing them. I don't have the white thing sticking out of my ears. Yeah.
That's the reason you don't have the Beats by Dre, or you didn't replace them with Bose. You got the dope Sony ones, so nobody knows who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps that's a good segue. Mike, you want to introduce our guest here?
We got Steve Hetzel here with the Orlando Magic. He's an assistant coach with the NBA team. Steve and I go back to, I honestly don't recall off the top of my head, elementary school for sure. Thanks for joining us. Really excited to share Steve with everybody today. Ryan, you want to add on to that at all?
No, I got to talk first. I appreciate that, Mike. Means a lot. Like, I just want to say, first off, we met in second grade when I moved from Kansas City to Detroit, and our Allen Park, our hometown. And Mike was the guy with all the micro machines. Our relationship goes all the way back to second grade. We became closer and closer as time went on. For me, as friends of both of you, listening to you guys is not only like exciting because of what you're doing, but it's very therapeutic for me, like hearing your guys' voice and talk about subject matters. And it takes me back to a time when, like, oh, that's why I am friends with these guys. It's important to have people in your life that speak in a way that care about the things that they say matter to them. You have distinct opinions and a real way of life that you believe in that has brought you to this platform that you started, just your own enjoyment, and it's reaching out to others. And I know it's going to help a bunch of people. So this thing's awesome. I'm a real fan, and I'm happy for you guys. Not to keep talking, I even went and listened to the NBA Junkies episode.
Nice.
Just so I could hear you guys some more. And like, I thought you guys were real, intelligent dudes. And then I heard Ryan start talking about the NBA, and I was like, whoa, man, call me before you go. Call me next time.
It's dangerous. We step outside of our wheelhouse, It's dangerous. It's real dangerous. I promise, Steve, we're not going to drag you out of your comfort zone today. But yeah, Ryan and I really stepped out on a plank there. Ryan, any follow-up to the NBA Junkies experience?
I spent a lot of time with data, but not player data. So I guess I see ball players maybe a little bit different. I see them as teams, and I think Steve. It's funny because Steve and I were prepping for the show, and we were talking about coming on today. And I think you may have just mentioned something previous to that, Steve, about like, man, it's weird when I listen to these NBA podcasts. It's hard for me to get into it because it's my job, it's my life. And I was just like shaking my head. But that was before I told you that we had recently been guests on Taylor and Jeff.
Oh, no.
No, it's been an interesting journey here. I think, each of our episodes probably have a little bit of content about how we came along the way. But Steve, you summarized it really well. And I think, we started out just recording ourselves on our USB drives and we never even said we were going to release the first season of episodes. And, we're in season number 2 now, which is really what we talked about from the get-go, getting more toward these interview-based podcasts. And it's kind of cool because we're both pretty fortunate to have a deep Rolodex. I think the first 3 interviews of this season, you being the third one that'll probably go live, they're really just people in our Rolodex. And, it's so cool to hear the props. It's kind of weird. When we first started out, we knew that we had support from our friends, but the transition to watching the downloads grow and understand that even people in Italy download the show and listen to it. It's pretty weird.
No, I honestly, just having someone like Steve on the show, it is kind of what we set out to do, right? Just talking with buddies, and in particular, the kind of buddies that have held us accountable over these years. Kicked our ass when we needed our ass kicked, and we're celebrating each other's victories and lifting each other up when we're down. I know that sounds kind of cheesy and cliche, but we're just fortunate enough to have enough people in our lives that we can kind of share with others. And like Steve, you're such a friggin' shining example of that, man. Where are you right now? You're in Las Vegas, right?
Yep, Las Vegas Summer League.
Steve, in case I misspoke, your professional title right now, what are you doing?
I'm an assistant coach with the Orlando Magic. That's my title.
How many years have you been coaching in the NBA, though?
This is my 14th year. 2005-06 was my first year. Heading into 19-20, this will be my 14th year. The summer of 2005, you and I hopped in that white Ford was on its last legs, and we made it from East Lansing, Michigan, all the way down there.
That was sketchy, man. I remember taking off that night, right? Yeah, so that takes us back a little bit, and that was kind of my intention, because I'm not just going to make you sound like the hardest working dude ever, but you're the hardest working dude I've ever known. So I am going to touch on that over and over again, but there's a lot more to Steve than just his work ethic. We all spent some time together in East Lansing. We've all been roommates at one time or another. But yeah, he was working. I remember he was working at Michigan State for the basketball team. And at that time, it was like, all right, Steve's pretty serious about this coaching stuff. And I don't mean to trivialize it, but we were all doing our own stuff at that time. And Steve got, I think, a graduate assistant position with Michigan State men's basketball. And then a couple years later, he said he got a job with the Spurs, and off he went. And like you said, it's been 14 years since then.
I think at that point in time, it was weird because you were the guy who knew how to control the TV systems, right? And so if we go back 15 years, I mean, I'm sure that you guys in your professional environment now, Steve, you use extraordinarily advanced recording equipment, but you had a bunch of like satellite dishes that you were controlling.
Oh, you guys make it like I was a NASA.
Well, dude, you were doing something that no one else we knew was doing, right? Like,
when I showed you the basketball offices, it was very impressive from a standpoint of you're just like, whoa, I didn't realize that all this went on. And in all reality, everybody has a direct TV, DVR in their home. The basketball office just has 20 of them. So that you can record 20 different games to 20 different DVD. At that time, VHS and DVD. And then, be able to cut the film into the computer. So you guys are right. So my path at Michigan State, I took a longer path than usual than most people to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. I was very lost soul at a young age in terms of I had this blank canvas in front of me of what to do and what I wanted to do. Like, if you don't mind, I'd like to reference some of the people that you've had on this show. And forgive me for not knowing their names, and you could plug it right in. But started, I think, with your first guest, the first guest that you had, and his ambition, knowing what he wanted to do, starting with his lawn cutting company, his landscaping company, was at a very young age. And I think the importance of that is his success from that point was determined on him figuring out if he puts his effort towards something and his mind to something, if you reap the rewards or the benefits just start coming your way once your mind is focused on an individual task. And so many of us don't have that write down a list of goals, achieve those goals mentality. I know for myself, I didn't at all. I was just walking through life. I love life. I've always had fun. Living life, enjoying time with friends. That's what I really enjoyed, was time spent with other people. So I didn't put a lot of time into what do I want to do or how do I get there. And the path for so many of us it's just blocked. There's a big walls and roadblocks in front of us that we don't know how to get to, that we don't express, that we don't understand how to get around the wall or over it. And many times our peers or influences don't know that that's what we need. And we don't know the right questions to ask. And we're not misled. It's just nobody sees that we need direction. I had a blank canvas in front of me. I had switched majors 3 times. I was working 2 jobs and giving plasma on the side, just to stay up there. So yeah, I was working to maintain a life at Michigan State because I didn't want to be anywhere else but Michigan State. And I felt broken down because I hadn't made gains in my education. I was 5 years there with a sophomore education in terms of credits received. And this is going into my 5th year. I said, I'm going to coach basketball and I'll get a degree and be a gym teacher. I'll coach high school basketball and I love it. That's what I've always enjoyed is basketball, football, sports. My whole life was based around sports. So I said, I just got to go back to what makes me happy. So I worked at the intramural building the whole time that I was at Michigan State. My boss, he was a women's Division I referee. And he had a relationship with the basketball office because he would referee their practices at the beginning of the season. And so he got me an in as a student manager. And that's when I started working with the team. And I continued to work at the intramural building, and it didn't pay very much. My second job was being a manager, and that didn't pay anything. So I had a bridge card that I would split with Ryan, so we would lessen the rent, and we would, we make it work. You just make it work. That was our life at Michigan State. I saw that, I was there. I was overwhelmed by just like the information and the knowledge that I was seeing and the teaching that I had never been taught in the game of basketball. Mike and I were very fortunate to have some of the best high school football teaching head coaches. At one point, they're in the Hall of Fame, and they were our assistants. And so our high school football ran like a college program from terms of preparation. So I understood that, what it took. And when I saw what was going on with the basketball team, I was like, this is exactly what our high school football was like. They cut film, they study, and they prepare. I was like, this is it. Like, this is me. I could do this. I saw the importance of the video coordinator solely through the coaches constantly coming to him for information. And not so bluntly, but I said, teach me what you're doing. And so that's how I began creating value for myself with the basketball program. And it started there. That man, Paul Rivers, got hired by San Antonio the next year. And when I graduated, he had asked me to come to San Antonio, and that was the start of my NBA career.
It's funny. One of the first things that really jumped out at me is when you talked about your early years at MSU and that kind of feeling of just wandering a bit, and how sometimes, like, even your closest peers, your friends, family, loved ones don't necessarily know you're wandering. And I think, like, we grew up, man, with such a heavy emphasis on sports, just blue collar town, right? Like you said. But yeah, all of a sudden you go to college and there you are out in the world, and like, I remember you got that job at the intramural building right away. Literally, like, we had freshman orientation, which was basically just a blur. And then within a couple weeks, you were just jobs. You had a job right away. And I mean, that didn't surprise any of us because we knew in high school you were getting up at 4 a.m. and throwing papers with your dad, and we knew you were doing that in middle school too. And
you increase your likelihood of good luck by hard work. And then there's this weird mix of faith that happens, and I don't know that you were unique in that way, Steve, right? I mean, I think that coming from an area where you focus on something that's so much different than what you learn at college, and that happens to a lot of kids across the country, you have to at some point start to sprinkle in some faith that what you're doing is the right thing. But Steve, I mean, for you were fortunate that it was sports that kind of led you there, but it wasn't until like later in your college career, as far as I remember, that and this happens for a lot of people, but you start to really kind of like formalize those pieces. There's that opportunity to grow up, and there's that opportunity to have faith, but then, you really start to think, oh man, this could be something that I could do for the rest.
Stuff starts to click, right? Like when you're 18, your brain, I don't think most of us when we're 18, even if, everything clicks because we think we're really smart when we're 18. But yeah, then there's that in between period where we find out how dumb we are. And then if we're lucky enough towards the end there, something else does click. And at that point, ideally you haven't burned bridges and messed up too bad. And I mean, I'm not talking about like super negative things. I'm just talking about the struggles of like being in college without clear direction. Like that shit will chew you up real quick. It gets expensive real quick.
How'd you get the direction, Steve? I mean, was it that literal? Did somebody sit you down and give you that direction?
Just to go back before I found the direction, you hit on a good point, Ryan, of the faith and, like a lot of the work ethic and the faith, like how do we make things happen for ourselves is based on the work that you put in first. And then the belief that what you're doing is right. So those are, work ethic and
tied together.
Faith.
Yeah.
So, right. So much of it is how we're raised. And I have a super strong foundation from my family. Like my mom and dad are the best. They're the best. And my mom ran a nursery from her home, and my dad worked 2 jobs. Like it made me the person that I was. So like those newspaper routes wasn't because I was an entrepreneur saying I want to make money in 6th grade.
You didn't have a choice if you were helping dad with the route or not. Yeah.
No, not at all. But we got it done, we got it done. There was, I had many examples in growing up where people thought that I had a lot more money. Like my dad was a car salesman, was his other job. So he had a demo car. So I had to drive in a nice,
it was easy for people to make assumptions about how cushy your whole life was, right? We knew what kind of work you put in.
You could be judged at any point in your life, or you could be judged from different ways, I don't want to bounce all over the place, but it will take you into the big issue with today's society of social media and the fact that how quickly people are to judge and how shameful they can be with their judging, hiding behind a tagline. And so, yes, in a lot of ways I did feel judged, but at the same time, I always felt good. That's awesome that you think that, that means that I'm carrying myself the right way, at least. And I've always had that perspective because of the way that I was raised. I had a really strong foundation. My mother and father taught me what the difference between right and wrong. And whether or not I was doing right or wrong when I was younger, I always knew that the decision was either right or wrong.
What was right and wrong. Yeah, you didn't always make the right decision, but
I think you weren't as spiteful as a lot of kids are either, looking back at those times. It's 15 years ago now, but you have a lot of friends and you do a lot of wrong in college, especially compared to what your parents probably imprinted on you, right? And so much of it is just about that. But remembering back, there are kids that are doing wrong because they're mad, right? And they're doing wrong because that's what they feel is the right thing to do. And, define right and wrong for yourself as a listener. I'm not so concerned about what the action is, but one of the things that always sticks out about you.
I was just saying youthful interaction,
right.
We're not breaking laws by any means, but we're having fun.
For some kids, wrong is speeding. And for some kids, there are things that we did when we were in college that was pre-social media and was not recorded.
Right. Speak for yourself. I don't know. Don't incriminate me.
Now, okay. So now we've talked about, you've been in the league for a long time, and look, if you don't know who Steve is, take some time to Google him and look at his career. It's profound and it's continues to build. But now you have the opportunity to raise kids and imprint right and wrong yourself. And I don't want to shift completely to that point, but I do want to start to pepper that in for the show, because I think that is the biggest part of that I've learned about you over adult years, right? So there's this component, and I'm probably even guilty of it, of saying, I have a buddy who coaches in the NBA. I'm like, that's cool. You start talking about it, it's really cool. But the reality of,
I throw that shit out there all the time.
The reality of that, and this goes back to Gabe a little bit, who you mentioned earlier about building the fences and such, is the reality of when we actually see each other, the talk is not as much about basketball, partially because of my knowledge, if you listen to that conventioNOT episode, but really a little bit more about how you make do being what it is, and not necessarily who you are, but what it takes to be a high performing professional and what it takes to be around an elite lifestyle, so to speak, but to deliver messages at home. I mean, you got 3 kids, bro. And as far as I'm aware, I think they're all under 10, right?
Yeah. And Aiden will be 10 in September. Oh, I think that everything that you're taught as a child growing up, you lean on when you see your kids doing something, but also it's a joint effort, and my wife has, her background and the way that she's been raised. So part of the challenge is bringing our values together and communicating and making a plan. The process of life is to never stop learning. And I am very fortunate to be married to a woman that educates me every day and how to make a plan work, how to get your thoughts out there, achieve a goal, and get the end result. So that can apply to work at any level, but more importantly, it applies to our family. Our family structure is difficult from a sense of my job is high maintenance. I'm on the road a ton. When I'm at home during the season, the home games are like a road game. So we have to manage our lives in a way that we're constantly communicating. We understand our schedule. We're there for each other, even when we're not physically there. You have to make your presence felt with the kids so that when you re-enter the home after a road trip, or you re-enter the home after the season, after being in and out, that you try to make it as seamless as you can, so that they don't, it's not like, oh, so this dude's just home telling me what to do now. Like, yeah,
new guy, new mood, new everything. Yeah.
So it's, it's a challenge, and a good challenge. Like anything worth doing right takes work, anything. And for me, I know when I was younger, like 26, 27 in the NBA, working as a video coordinator, and the grind was so that the coaches can get the job done at the level that everyone feels should be done, is a daunting task. And so you should, everyone who doesn't know who a video coordinator is, or the behind the scenes person, you should tip your hat to the amount of work that they're doing. I knew at that age that I wanted a family, just based on the fact of how I was raised. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to seek out in life, is to have a family. It's the root of a lot of my happiness, is the fact that even though we might not have had a lot, we had a ton of love and a ton of happiness. And it was based on the way I was raised, with support and guidance, that I could do anything that I wanted to do. They always made, my parents and my brothers and sister always made me feel like I could do anything, and they always gave me confidence. So I wanted that in my life. And I looked at the NBA as a real challenge before I had even met Ann. And I had wondered, do I want to go to college? Do I want to even do this coaching thing? So there was a lot of doubt, even once I had found the career path. As each season goes, we get better and better at it. And our family, through that, is getting stronger and stronger. And you could see the love between us and the communication. There's no resentment they're at the age, Aiden's at the age where he thinks it's cool that I'm an NBA coach. But 2 years ago, not so much. And the girls are at the age where they don't care. They just,
it's just
they just want dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's the good and the bad of everything. So there's the financial support that you put in. There's the bad of the instability of the job in the NBA, that coaches get fired 1 year, 2 years. You make it 5 years anyway. You've had a good run. There's the instability of not knowing where you're going to live 3 years from now. All those things just make you want to solidify your home life even more, to make that the most important thing, so that whatever happens, you have the support that you need, that you can continue to go on.
Ultimately, what's the mentorship like from your colleagues, whether they be co-coaches? I mean, is there mentorship from players to learn how to work with the family? I mean, because you're not the only guy at that age that figures out shit, man, my job is not going to line up really well with my family intentions.
It's who you have in your life as your own support group, and who I can look to that has a life outside of the type of job that I have, looking to my brother for advice and how he's doing with his family. And, they're fortunate that his job takes him to work and back home every day. So he gets to go to all the sporting events and everything. And so it's a different perspective. And yet, if I speak to him enough, I can find out the ups and the downs that they're having. So it's not just myself that's having ups and downs because of the job. So, I look to peers that I have a close relationship with, that I know they view or have the same values as I do. So a real close friend of mine that works for the Atlanta Hawks, Chris Gent, has a family, and I met him in Cleveland 10 years ago. And we were drawn to each other just by our values. And so I could always look to him and ask him how he does things and what they do. There is definitely, a bond, because you're going through the same thing, but not everybody's wired the same way.
Yeah.
And so even people that I work with have different values or at different stages of their life, to where they either did it that way or they didn't. And the root of my success with my family has come from my wife. Her ability to hone us in and talk about the things that are going to work. This is what needs to be done to help it work. And then the back and forth between her and I of making it work. So
Yeah.
it's not the right word to say sacrifice, because I'm not giving anything up that I don't want to give up. It's just, I guess, altering how you structure your day when you're on the road so that you maximize the time that you have, or the time that you can impact your family while you're away. And I think it's important that everybody that has that type of job puts the amount of thought into it, to not just saying, once I leave on that plane or that road trip, and I'm just gone for 5 days. You're never gone, and you have to have, you have to touch your children without physically being there. Whether it's FaceTime, routine, whatever, them sending you videos, the whole nine.
I got to admit, like seeing you as a coach, I always knew what sort of satisfaction you got from that. You are always an exceptional leader. But you weren't the type to pat yourself on the back or celebrate your own victories. So it doesn't surprise me that, this version of you is by far the most content I've ever seen. And you've been doing well in coaching for a long time, but I think you're getting the balance now. And like, I see the pride and just the happiness you get from your family. Like you said, you don't want to call it a sacrifice, but I'm afraid a lot of other dads out there would consider some of the things that you do to make your family situation work a sacrifice. When you meet those people that share those values, and even if they just lift you up a little bit, like you got to latch onto those people. You never know how quickly that platform's going to disappear, but those connections, those personal relationships, that's on you, and it's worth holding on to and preserving.
To be content is the ultimate fulfillment, right? That's what we all seek. Like sometimes we struggle internally with where we're at with our job. Like, are we content, or are we happy within our job? Do we seek that promotion? Are we trying to be the boss? Are we happy in our role? So it works on all different levels of content. So I know I was seeking out a relationship that would drive to get a family, and yet you don't really know the amount of work that it takes to make that dream that you have of having the family actually work. And a lot of times, like, we have the end goal of becoming the boss or becoming a head coach, but we don't necessarily know the steps that it takes to get there, or there's a lot of different steps and ways that you can go there. There's no right answer. But it more importantly, it's committing yourself to the process of it takes what it takes. Because of the individual attention that everyone that's on social media receives, you have this illusion of choice that you can do whatever you want to do to get to where you want to go. And we do have a lot of choices, but like at the end of the day, it takes what it takes. And if somebody's helping you with a plan to how to get there, you have to commit to that plan. And once you commit to the plan, you'll start to see the results that you want.
Once you commit, it's easier. But yeah, finding that plan is hard as hell. I mean, Steve, you're in Orlando for 2 years. Before that, you're in Charlotte for what, 4?
Yeah, 4 years in Charlotte.
And how long were you and Ann together in Detroit?
We started the process of my last 2 years when I was with the Pistons, and I had been released from the Pistons and out of work as we were getting married.
When was Canton? Sorry.
Canton was the year that Ann and I got married in 2013. So I was living in Canton, and she was finishing her master's at the University of Michigan. And so she was staying with her parents. And so it wasn't that far of a drive. So we made it work.
Gotcha. But those big moves you're talking about that are really difficult for any family to go through. You've had to go through at least 3 of those as a family, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And expect to every several years, right? I mean,
I don't know how you coaches do it.
We've had a lot of guests on who go through this major transformation, whether it be from addiction or, a life-changing event or something like that. But it is a little bit different when you have to plan for a life-changing event like that. And so you have to prep for that type of like monumental change every, several years or so. Ann is also a D1. Well, I mean, she was both a D1 basketball player and a coach early in her career before she went to grad school, right? And so when you talk about a family that has to not only understand where their own priorities come in, because don't think that the Hetzels collectively aren't competitive people, right? You don't get to those levels about being competitors, but also to yield that competitiveness to your partner. That takes a lot, man.
I really enjoy that you bring that up, and like to speak about my wife and her accomplishments. It brings a lot of joy to me. When you talk about sacrifice and a plan, she's an extremely successful woman. She's at a highly competitive and committed job as a Division I basketball coach. And she sacrificed her career to support my career and then strengthen my career. It takes a plan. So at that point, it was, we're going to see where we're at in 5 years. If I'm continuing to be successful, if our family is functioning and flourishing, and we might continue it, but we're going to reevaluate it after 5 years. Because if I chose not to do this job and she could go out and provide for our family, she would tell you she would never do it any different, because having 3 kids at home, I don't want to call her a single parent, but they are. When I'm gone, like, it's 24/7 for her, and it's an exhausting task, all for the benefit of our family.
Yeah.
And we're always looking at it through a lens of how can we both find the equal happiness. And I think we're getting to that point where she could start to find her workplace so that she can continue to grow herself. And the last thing I'm going to say is I wouldn't have any of this success without her, not just like husband to wife ode, but like, she's so smart. Like, she got her MBA from Michigan, which is like accomplishment all in itself. And when I went to interview for a head coaching job in the G League, the way she mapped out the plan, if it wasn't with her, I'd walk in and say I could coach. And yet with her, she just lined it up like, this is how you do it. And I walked in there like a boss and just crushed it because of the structure that she gave me, the knowledge that she invoked from everything that she had learned. So I never feel like it's just me doing it. She gives me the confidence to be able to do this job.
Well, isn't that an important statement when you talk about the help from home? If you don't have a kind of a conjoined intelligence, it's really hard. I assume you have a little bit better resume than like I coach basketball, but at the same time, the type of dynamic of like, hey, I realize your space at the table, so I will listen to help. Yeah,
I mean, you're gone a lot. Like, that's not the ideal, that's not the ideal situation at all. To just not be there, to have 2 weeks in China for training camp, or to go to Las Vegas for 10 days during the summer. It's not ideal at all. But it is what this job requires. I don't know if I would do this type of job if it wasn't so self-fulfilling for myself to say that I've actually reached the highest level that I can. To be able to work with the best athletes in the world and to be able to build a relationship of trust with them, that they believe that I'm going to make them better. That's coaching, that's teaching.
You think, Steve, in your situation is particularly unique in that she has that basketball background, right? So what I'm getting at is, how much more difficult would it be if you were being a lawyer, or if she didn't have that shared background in basketball? Like, do you think that makes it a lot easier?
Everything, in my opinion, starts with your willingness to try to understand what the other person is going through. So if I was a lawyer, and I was trying to be the best lawyer, that's the way that my wife is put together.
As long as you were trying to be the best lawyer, right?
Yeah, that's just how she's built. And I guess it's different for everybody. And, like you made points of her being in the profession, that gives us great mutual understanding and talking points. And like, she's into right now with the free agency. Like the NBA free agency is absolutely nuts, right? The amount of change, it's crazy. It's fun to talk about, but she's into it because she likes basketball and she's into the team and she likes knowing about the players and she likes knowing about the process of how I'm working with a player. And she gives her advice, which is very insightful because of the experiences that she has. And she always piggybacks that you don't have to use it, And it's like, you don't have to say that. Like, just speak your mind. That's what opinions are. They're your opinion. Whether I choose to use it or not is up to me, but I'm always willing to hear her opinion. And it's so enjoyable that she can watch a game and like, not just say, well, they played, but she can specifically say, man, if this guy would have done this, that would have helped. Or what do you think's up with this guy? He didn't play so well. She could give thoughtful and insightful,
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess what I hear you're saying is the shared knowledge is a perk, right? But it's not inherent to an understanding and that mutual support, right? Imagine that G League interview without her prepping you. I mean, Steve, I remember how you got elected to student council in high school. It was you did. You stood up and said, "Hey, my name's Steve Hetzel. I'm running for vice president." But yeah, I mean, I
listened to somebody recently. Her name's Jennifer Newsom, and she was on another show. She is the spouse to the governor of California. And she was on a show probably slightly a little larger than ours, but she has produced a series of films about toxic masculinity. Okay. And toxic masculinity is this term that makes, I think, and I won't speak for you two, but guys like me go and kind of like curdle a little bit because I don't like being called toxic and I don't like the idea that masculinity and toxicity are attached. But she was talking a little bit about being, and I pull this out because Steve, you mentioned this. She was talking about the willingness to be a partner. And the willingness to be a partner is not always so tied to traditional roles. It's a little bit more about the willingness to be a partner. But ultimately, what she's done, she's produced these films that have a lot to do with the psychological makeup of kids and the way that they're brought up. And we're brought up to understand that like crying is a sissy thing or it's a girl thing. And, pink is for girls and dolls shouldn't be played with and all those things that, again, sometimes when life gets along and things get more serious, we start to roll our eyes at that type of shit. But there's some data that say that, when you're trying to pick a partner, and maybe it's easier when you're young because all of us were pretty fortunate to be married, right around age 30, I guess. And except, Mike, you and Nicole been together for a longer time. But one of the things that I watch a lot of my buddies now struggle with is finding a partner who will be willing with them. And you better remember, if you're the spouse who has somebody who else is willing, that the willingness to come back and for you to be willing to that person to go along with it when it's time. And that's hard. I mean, I don't know if any of the three of us are great relationship advice people. But I guess we all have been married for a while now. We have started to figure that out.
I'll just say this, like, it's whatever you value, like we could preach to anybody about what we believe is right or wrong. But at the end of the day, it's where your values are based. We're giving shout outs to them and all this greatness. And we're telling about how good our lives are because of them. And yet any marriage takes work and there's ups and there's downs. And that is the best part of it. It really is. Like, my job is hard and our life is not easy.
Yep.
Moving is not easy at all. And yet I love Bob Dylan and I send her the cover of a Bob Dylan album that says Together Through Life. And she smiles back and we're rocking with it because these are the decisions that we made. And we're not looking back and we're going to do it together. And now that is like the angelic or the ideal thing, right? When you say together through life and it's all happiness, but like, it's a good way to reset and focus and say, this is what we chose to do. Let's make it happen together for us, not individually what's best for just me or what's best for just you, but together, her and I. And so much of that, like, I think you hit on it with the age that we found. And Mike, you're the outlier with Nicole, who's been with you for so long. But like, so much of the strength of your relationship, Mike, is the knowledge that you have from day one. All of the things that you know about each other, the deepest darkest parts and the best things about you that Nicole sees in you and that you see in her.
I honestly want to just be quiet for a second to let that sink in, but you guys both know I'm not good at that. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not going to really do it. We can insert a pause there, but yeah. And you say the shared values, right? Wanting to get married and have a family is not necessarily a shared value, right? That's a shared goal, but in order to get there, there's going to be a lot of bumps along the way, right? So those baseline values, that's got to be more on point in order to reach that goal. Steve, can I ask you a this isn't that deep or serious. What are you doing right now as a coach in Vegas? Like, just tell me something cool about your day. Don't tell me the like behind the scenes stuff. Tell me how cool it is to be a coach in the NBA.
I don't know.
It's not that sexy, eh?
Yeah. I mean, like today's a day off, and I'm gonna work out one of our players later today because he's coming in from a different city.
Okay.
It's different. Yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. Summer League is unique from a standpoint that all 30 teams are here, and whether you like the network or not, it's a networking platform, and so you have to take advantage of it. You see all the people that you worked with over the years. Even though you go through those ups and downs of changing jobs, the benefit is that you expand your network. And through some of your guys' previous podcasts, that's the big deal. It's a big deal, the connections.
It's like a convention, right?
Basically, yeah. There's a lot of dinners and meeting with people. Like when I go on the road to Denver, I see one of my best friends that I worked with in Canton, Jordy Fernandez. And when I go to Atlanta, I got to decide whether I'm going to hang out with Ryan McDevitt and Anna or Chris Gent. Like when I go to Las Vegas with all 30 teams, and I can have dinner with Jordy and Gent, and it's truly educational because you start talking basketball and you're hearing their thoughts and ideas and what their team is doing and what they're,
is the whole coaching staff like from all the teams there, or because this is in the summer league, it's not the whole team, right? It's like the younger guys mostly.
Well, each summer league, each team is different. Like it depends on where you're at. The different things are handled at all different levels. But for the most part, most every team brings their whole staff out, and then they're there. And then some teams are different in how they divvy out the roles and responsibilities of their assistant coaches and who's coaching summer league and who's just in the stands watching. And it's different for every team. I like,
gotcha.
And like these kids they're either right out of college, they're from the G League. There's 2 or 3 from our team some year, and it's this hodgepodge mix. And there's just a great challenge in front of you to make a team functional in 5 days.
So sorry, exactly what I was just going to ask. During the season, there's 14, 15 guys on an NBA roster?
There's 15 roster spots. You don't have to hold 15. A lot of teams like to have 13 or 14 spots filled so they have flexibility to make moves throughout the season, whether that's adding a player.
But you got 18 guys.
Summer League, there's no limit to the roster. So during the regular season, there's 15 roster spots, and then you have room for 2 two-way players, which are assigned to your G League team that can travel back and forth to your club. So those 18 guys, it's a mix of players that have played overseas for a couple of years, that are undrafted from the draft that just happened, that are trying to say, hey, man, you guys missed out. And what they're saying, Summer League, the thing about Summer League is just like the G League, the scouts know. They know who they're watching. They know who was on the cusp of being drafted. It's not like they just watch that one game and we're like, oh, we got to get this guy. They've been watching for a while. And then they said, okay, I see what he looks like. The ability to play in the NBA is the equivalent to winning a lottery ticket. The absolute percentages are just minute. And there is so much talent outside of the NBA that is just an inch away from being in the NBA. And it might just be
But it's a big,
it might just be there a half an inch too short. So much talent sitting right there. And if the guys that can figure it out like that quick, they have a chance. They don't. So it's really it's a fun thing to take all these different personalities and agenda within 5 days and try to preach to them in a way that's the same as any team. If the team does well, you will do well. That if you're looking to just score, then the team's not going to function well and you're not going to show well. And it's that message that you hope in a short time that they actually trust what you're saying is true, because they have an entire different support group, agents, families, friends, former coaches that are telling them things that they think that they want to hear. And so it's that's the coolest part about Summer League, is trying to help people that you just met, try to find jobs. Through. Yeah.
What happens? Like, I know this is random, but I guess all the European dudes speak English, right?
For the most part. I mean, there's some of it's broken English. It depends on their age, youth, or everybody's different.
The 18 guys on your team, is it a mix? Like, how do they decide who goes on whose team?
It's all based on relationships that the front office members make with the agents throughout the year. So the relationships that they have, they're calling out and saying, you represent this player. We'd like to have him on our Summer League team.
But nobody's getting paid, right?
Nobody gets paid to play for the Orlando Magic Summer League team. No, it's just an opportunity.
Okay.
That's what it is.
So you're talking to guys though, and this is a very different dynamic, I would think, than most of the year, right? Like, you're talking to guys who, yes, if they were mature and wise, they would know it'd be in their best interest to take your sage advice, because they're trying out for everyone, right? But during the year, it's probably a little bit easier because you're their coach. And you're going to be their coach all year. But this is like a total open tryout, right? Like,
it is and it isn't. There's, not every player listens during the season. There's a process of, we just got here to Orlando this season. We were 11 games under 500 in January. So not everything that we were preaching was being executed on the court. And it took a lot of time to build the relationship. Any leader in any job, the best ones, find the temperature of the room, find the temperature of the person, and how can you connect with that person to maximize or get them to understand what will benefit them and the team on the court. And so there's a process of relationship building, because you're not always telling them what they want to hear, telling them what would benefit the team. You sacrifice this play here to get this guy a shot. They don't always want to hear that, or they don't necessarily agree or don't have the same view of how the game should be played. So it happens. There's nothing wrong with somebody that doesn't know, that's naive to what would actually help them. So telling the youth that comes in isn't like, shame on you for not knowing, you should listen to me. It's like, how can I build a relationship that this guy actually believes that what I'm telling him will help him?
Do you, at this point in your career, like, I know early on Summer League, it was a little bit heavier for you, right? Like, was it a little bit more pressure on you at that? Because, everyone's trying out to an extent.
I know for myself, when I was younger and I was at lower level positions, Summer League was a tremendous opportunity for me to gain my voice. I was given opportunity that was above my position. I was allowed to coach, which I think is important if we're speaking to a larger crowd that's not just sports. The ability to empower your employees, they can't grow without a chance. If you can understand when your time for growth will come, then you can be more content with the job that you have to do. Summer League was always an opportunity for me to take on more responsibility. I know for myself, and when I was younger, I would ask for it. And I would, if this is a position, hey, I would talk to the head coach and say, do you mind if I take a scout for Summer League? I would really love to present in front of the team and start practicing. Because during the regular season, as a video coordinator, that opportunity is not presented whatsoever. And so if you're constantly being held to your position's titles and there's no room for growth, you can't maximize the potential of the person. Or you'll also always be seen as that person who can only do that role.
Man, that is the truth across profession, not across business, across teams and across profession, because I think this is partially why athletes make good leaders. Although not all athletes are great leaders, we know that. But the reality is that giving that chance and then allowing that person, like you said, like giving that opportunity and then allowing that person to fall back into their position and be back where they were, where they're supposed to be from their best role, is something that not every leader could do. A lot of leaders promote somebody to a position, they'll either make it or they won't, but it's a binary win or a loss for them. And that becomes a huge struggle, because when you create a culture like that in which your team members are fearful that they won't have a place at the table to go back to, they don't step out.
If we want to hone in on just the success part, maybe forget about happiness for a moment, but success, when that opportunity arises, not everyone takes it. Because it's scary as hell. That opportunity is usually an enormous thing. And in your mind at that point, you inevitably think of it as a little bit of a sink or swim type situation. And I think most people, like I always say, man, like most people would rather stay in their comfort. If you're in an environment where you're not going to get a life raft, it's stupid to jump and take those risks and take that opportunity. But I just wonder if along every single successful person's path, there's at least a consistency there to be willing to go out to get that fruit that's way out on the limb. I don't want to say fake it till you make it in the same sentence as in my career, but I know there's been plenty of times.
Especially as an expert witness.
Yeah, no. Obviously, I knew what I was doing all along. But come on, man. Everybody needs a first chance. And I can tell you a lawyer isn't really excited to give an expert witness their first chance. And me as an engineer, like it's not innately within me to want to expose myself like that, to want to take risks. So
I think it's the greatest challenge in life. I think your last guest, Lawrence, hit on it very well, is that his success is based on his lack of fear of failure. And I think that is what holds an enormous amount of people back. Part of my presentation in my head coaching interview was the ability to eliminate fear of failure amongst the team. And once the team can actually say, let me do that again to get it right, rather than being worried about what do I look like doing it wrong, and you start to make great strides. So it's much easier said than done. I do believe that it's a personality trait. I don't believe that it's something that cannot be overcome. I think once you start to finding that goal first, what you want to accomplish will help with that. But taking risk is not an easy thing, but you have to be able to put yourself out there, and just, like the jump is exhilarating, and the ability to say that I want more and that I can do this. It's not for everybody. There are people that you need in their roles to do things that are comfortable doing their roles, but you've got to be willing to take the failure.
You're not just going to sit around and become happy and successful. I think you really do have to make that leap at some point.
Fear of failure is something that will pause almost all of us in our tracks.
Yeah.
You could ask a deeper question, which is, why am I fearful of failure? In a lot of cases, it's fear to be ostracized. If you're listening and you are scared of failure, you somehow have to figure out a way to ask for your own opportunity first. The reason that Steve was able to step forward there was because he would always ask. And you're super humble dude, but you might not say this. You ask it in a friendly and a thoughtful manner. The next thing is understand where your fear of failure comes from. Because if it's a fear of being ostracized, the reality is that it's probably because you've got to take a little bit different look in the mirror. Okay. Now, there's real risk of hurting yourself, right? For things, right? You could really hurt yourself, or you could put yourself in too much of a financial risk. Those are things that should be fear of failure. I don't want to dissuade from those. But if there
are real dangers,
there are real dangers, and you could really lose it, right? I mean, there are really people who become bankrupt. Look at why you have that fear. Who would you be ostracized from? Why would those people ostracize you for failing? And it doesn't make you wrong always, but being able to understand those 2 or 3 steps deeper, I think makes a big difference in the way that you process those emotions. At some point in your career, you're probably going to have an L on your record, and the way you process that failure is what makes a big difference.
I think one thing it's impossible for guys like us to not take for granted is how fortunate we are to have had this stability and support that we've known throughout our lives. We all grew up in really solid homes. We all have really good relationships with our siblings. Mm-hmm. And we've all been really lucky enough to make some really good friends along the way. So for us to talk about failure, we've always had a net. Steve, Ryan, myself, we've always had a net that, I can appreciate that others don't necessarily have, right? And you need that net. You need that net, and that net is people and relationships. And I know I always go off about it, but
you've got to start building that net by showing up. I mean, that's
exactly.
It, right?
You got to contribute to those relationships. On that note, if you don't mind me making a slight segue, I recently we did an interview with a buddy of ours who's also achieved quite a bit of success in his professional career. And at some point during the interview, we started to talk about accountability and the relationships and the people that you include in your life. And I told this story about how my buddy, who's in the NBA, had a really great opportunity, and he really thoughtfully reached out to a number of us. I was obviously talking about you, and then I went on to describe how when I called you back within 24 hours, but when I called you back,
which is good for Mike,
you were very quick to remind me how important it is to pick up that phone. And that's exactly like, all right, Steve, call me on my shit. I get it. But I'm 37 and he's still taking care of me. He's still calling me on my shit. Like, it's lucky to hear that kind of scolding. It lets you, when you're a kid and your parents are yelling at you, it's a lot different. When you get older, it makes you feel a little bit more loved. It really does.
Yeah, you don't get to a point in your life where you outgrow accountability from the people who are closest to you, because if you do that, you've outgrown your growth, and your relationships are probably becoming surface.
There's not going to be too many people around you for too long if you've outgrown that.
And I think if you find, like, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, man, everybody in my life holds me accountable, always, 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 you might want to listen a little more. Right? Because people who are willing to hold you accountable are definitely willing to compliment you. Okay. Not always, but in most cases. And you have to be able to build those relationships. I think a lot of us, and this is a little bit of like Americanism, I think, is a lot of times because we have this weird relationship with our elders, but we feel like we're going to get to this point in life where the accountability is going to stop. Maybe it's a point in your job. Maybe it's a point in like your
skill. Yeah, like that equals comfort, right?
Right.
If you make enough money, you don't have to be accountable anymore.
I love that he takes what I say as accountability and checking him. And in my mind, it's more of playful banter, because it really was a string of events. I called for my best friends and none of them answered. So, but I have felt 100% comfortable telling the story because of the strength of the relationship. Like to piggyback everything that you're saying, like Mike takes it as accountability and saying, oh, I should pick up the phone, because we don't reach out that much to where I just know I was going to talk to you tomorrow. Like we have our own lives, we have our own things going on. That's the beauty of a really strong bond. That relationship is developed over time. It's developed with commitment. It's developed with ups and downs. There's, like Mike and I have known each other for I don't even know the amount of years, but we spoke on it since second grade. So I know when I could tell him something. Yeah, I know when I could tell him something, and he's just going to hear it as me speaking rather than take offense to it. You guys keep on saying that about I'm too humble to talk about it. I don't like talking about myself. And so when an opportunity comes my way that is bigger than what I could ever imagine happening to myself, there's a certain group of people that I want to share it with. And so that's part of the strength in relationship.
I'm proud to be in that group, Steve. I think, I think we could really record this for hours because I know that we're just now like getting the tip of the iceberg of advice and thought process, because we all have a lot, especially you have a lot of time to think with travel and reflection on the way that things grow and the way that you see people succeed and fail in front of you, man. I'm proud that you came on the show today to open up some of the stuff. I'll admit that I was a little bit fearful that this turned into like a conversation about sports. Perspective, I think that's important. But the reality is that we were able to come in and talk a little bit more about why the vehicle of sports has become the way that you stay happy in your life. Somehow you're able to be a beacon of light in so many people's lives. And it has a lot more to do with a smile and a kind heart than it does with a resume and a list of accomplishments. I mean, that's the reality of it. So really appreciate you coming on the show, man. I'm sorry that we have to go. I think that we'll probably have to get toward a second episode here at some point in time.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, well, if I increase your listeners, then I'll come back on. But if we start losing people on conventioNOT, then
there's some accountability for you. We feel the same way, Steve. So that's definitely true.
Yeah, if it bombs, yeah, we have to delete all evidence of it, right?
It was super flattering, man. I really enjoy what you guys do. It gives me peace of mind to hear you guys talking about the things that you talk about, because it takes me back to a time when that's how they used to talk to each other. We'd have real conversations that had depth to it.
Amen, brother. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Steve. Honestly, thank you so much. Have a little bit of fun in Vegas, eh?
One last final shout out, the parts of the show in which we urge you to follow us or subscribe. First and foremost, Steve coaches the Orlando Magic. Not a big social media guy, but if you follow Orlando Magic on Instagram, you will see him. And across a lot of media platforms, I'm starting to see you now, Steve. If you want to follow the show, it's at conventioNOT _podcast on Instagram. There's a YouTube channel that's out there now. You start to see a little bit of video. You might see a little bit of video from this clip or from the show. We cut the shows down for the video clips because certainly the audio is more important for us. You could also find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Steve, what platform do you listen to us on?
Apple, I guess. I have an app.
Apple?
I have an app that says podcast. And then that's how I receive it.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier if you're an Apple fan to find podcasts. I think if you're on a Google device, you do have to download an app of some sort. Most people use Spotify. Mike, I think you use Spotify, right?
Yeah, I use Spotify.
Yeah. So reach out to us if you can't find us where you want to find us. And other than that, again, thanks a ton, Steve. Really appreciate you. Good luck this season. Good luck with summer leagues. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Keep doing you, Steve.